A ghostly house built for a brutal dictator.
This is clearly something that is out of place. This is a very strange design and doesn't really fit.
An incredible feat of engineering left to rust in the wilderness.
This huge metal tunnel floating in midair just sort of arches down the mountain, disappears into the trees. It looks like it goes on forever.
Towers and buildings clinging to a cliff face.
You've got the waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashing beneath, and it's just like at any moment, they could collapse and just fall into the water below.
And a mysterious abyss set deep in a fantasy landscape.
There are still questions about this place. We don't have all the answers to the mysteries here.
Some are engineering marvels now abandoned. Others are ruins shrouded in mystery. Within these decaying structures are the echoes of history. Some are associated with dark times, but they also remind us of human ingenuity and endeavor. Each haunted shell is ready to be unmasked, to tell its own unique story. On the Greek island of Rhodes, to the east of the Mediterranean Sea, is a wrecked and battered building.
It's a rather grand, impressive mansion, but clearly has been abandoned or misused for a great many years.
That it's been meticulously vandalized from top to bottom in such a way and so purposefully that it suggests that it was done with a real sense of aggression or even hatred.
Set high above the towns and the coast below, the buildings look very different to those on the rest of the island.
This is an alpine lodge, not something one would expect to see on a hot Mediterranean island.
But it's not the only structure with an unfamiliar design.
Curiously, next to the house itself is an abandoned hotel with abandoned barracks. And then off in the distance, not too far away, is an abandoned village. So it's not an isolated case. Whatever happened here in this house also happened in the surrounding area.
Hidden away in the woods, the building might seem neglected and forgotten. But it is actually evidence of a defining moment for Rhodes during the 1930s, as local expert Choraphitis Eleftherios knows well.
It is really unique, and it was built at a period of time where there's still a kind of a peaceful and romantic mixture of cultures. It's sad because this kind of thing suddenly is going to change dramatically. In a few years' time, everything is going to become darker.
Significantly, Rhodes is 500 miles from mainland Italy, and it sits within a group of islands known as the Dodecanese. For nearly 400 years, they had been under the rule of the Ottoman Empire.
The strategic advantage that these islands afford has been coveted for centuries. And come the 20th century, that hasn't changed one bit.
In 1911, Italy will go to war with the Ottoman Empire, and some of the islands off the Turkish coast are seized by the Italians and become Italian territory.
After the First World War, the fascist government of Benito Mussolini seized control of Italy and began to settle Italian colonists on Rhodes. Built overlooking the island, this is Villa de Vecchi, the prized possession of the feared Italian governor of Rhodes.
De Vecchi actually was a very strict ruler. He was a kind of a man that he wanted to control everything. He actually didn't allow the people to talk their own language. They forced them to speak Italian. You know, all of our grandparents speak perfectly Italian today.
Here we have this Italian fascist governor, and he's built his own personal palace and castle. It's a monument to the vanity of what is really a small-time petty politician.
Born in 1884, Cesare Maria de Vecchi became a successful lawyer in Turin and, sadly for Rhodes, an enthusiastic supporter of the National Fascist Party. He had previously been governor of Italian Somaliland before fate intervened to take him to a previously peaceful Mediterranean island. Work on the villa actually began long before de Vecchi arrived, but he would eventually leave his very personal mark on the building. It oozed luxury, very much a place for the elite.
Like every other part of the house has been designed and made, constructed in Italy. This specific wood, for example, the beech wood and the parquet, was all made in the north of Italy. Materials, the designs, everything completely Italian. Every detail, very luxurious. It has to be somebody who was really #1 on the island, all right? And that means definitely a commander, a very luxurious person, a very rich person, or even a king.
The Italian influence was also seen in towns all across the island. But the villa was the jewel in the crown.
What this villa is saying with this quintessential Italian design is that this is now the new Italy. Rhodes is really important to us, and it's part of our plans for the future.
With the dark shadow of the Second World War falling across Europe, Mussolini made the fascist hardliner de Vecchi governor of Rhodes in 1936. The ruthless new governor was now able to add his own finishing touches to the villa project.
He was someone with an altogether more obsession about power, more obsession about fascism, more obsession about being a dictator. And we see that in the refined architecture and the additions that he brought to the villa.
When you come to this point, not only that you feel the absolute Lord, but you can see the whole of the coastline, Asia Minor, the coastline of Turkey. The north, you see actually the city of Rhodes. If I was in his shoes, I would feel like Zeus above Olympus. You are the god of the gods. And this is how he was feeling. The commander, the absolute commander, he was above all the people. He was the god of them.
With war looming and with weaker countries vulnerable to attack, Mussolini looked to extend Italian control further east. Rhodes became strategically vital to the plan.
Any empire requires forward operating platforms, staging posts, and bases from which to consolidate, command and control areas away from home. And for Mussolini, Rhodes was to be that place which would act as the area to command the new Eastern Roman Empire. This was not just another villa, and in fact is part of a larger complex. There is space for soldiers, there is space for visitors. This is clearly a guarded environment. This is somewhere where very senior people like Mussolini, could be.
You can see that there is a desire to make Rhodes into an important center for the new Italian fascist empire.
De Vecchi had firmly established the terrible fascist grip on the island. But life on Rhodes was about to become even worse. The Second World War quickly ended Italian dreams of a new Roman Empire. The heady early triumphs of the war became a distant memory, as a series of catastrophic defeats saw Italy forced to sue for peace. In September 1943, the Armistice of Cassibile was signed by Italy and the Allies, a condition of which was Italy's formal surrender. Within a month, Italy formally declared war on Germany, her former ally. Hitler had long since lost faith in Mussolini and Italy. When the surrender came, Germany snapped into action. One of the targets for Nazi retribution was Rhodes, which was soon seized by the German army.
Under the Nazis, the amount of war crimes, atrocities, brutality that the Nazis will visit on the Greek islands is pretty horrendous.
They murdered, they executed, they tortured, just to make it really clear, we are in charge now.
Following the war, the villa was kept ready for the arrival of new VIPs, but no one ever came. In 1955, it was abandoned for good. While Mussolini never set foot here, and De Vecchi had long left the island, to the people of Rhodes, the villa was a symbolic reminder of the violent years of oppression. It suffered as a result.
Pretty much as soon as the villa falls into disuse, the people take revenge. They deface it, they try to humiliate it. It's their way of getting a piece back at those who had oppressed them.
In the thick forests of West Virginia, USA, deep in the Appalachian Mountains, a river snakes through the formidable New River Gorge.
You're deep in what feels like a jungle or tropical forest. And you're heading into the middle of nowhere.
And as you go through the trees, you see these bits of rusting iron. There seems to be a scattering of abandoned machinery. And then scattered amongst all of this machinery are foundations of buildings, suggesting that once there must have been some kind of community there.
As you travel deeper, altogether stranger objects begin to appear.
One of the most impressive sights in the gorge is almost hidden by trees. You have to get up close to it, and then you realize there's this massive structure going up the side of the gorge.
This huge metal tunnel floating in midair just sort of arches down the mountain and disappears into the trees. It looks like it goes on forever.
What is this bizarre contraption? The answer is linked to a giant of industry and his stubborn obsession. The tale begins in mid-19th century England and with a man of extraordinary ambition who was driven by dreams of America. His name was John Nuttall.
The story of John Nuttall is a classic example of an ambitious young man who from the age of 11 was working in the mines, saves his money, and leaves England to seek his fame and fortune in the Promised Land.
Tragedy soon struck after Nuttall arrived on American soil, when his wife died, leaving him to care for their 3 young children alone. Yet his ambition remained undimmed, and one night he spotted something that would change his life.
While staying in a tavern, John Nuttall noticed that they were using a particular kind of high-grade smokeless coal. Then he discovers that the railways are going to be coming through, and he says, you know what? There's a fortune to be made here.
At $1 an acre, Nuttall snapped up as much of this rugged mountainside as he could. When the Chesapeake and Ohio railway line that ran through the gorge was completed in 1873, John Nuttall and the town were ready and waiting. This is Nettleburg. Its birth heralded an era of transformation and change.
For millennia, the New River Gorge was a wild, natural area. And then coal was discovered. It turned into this booming industrial zone with rail lines, coal trains rumbling through, mines operating day and night, towns growing up and down the gorge.
But what made New River coal so easy to access?
The river course cuts through the Appalachian Mountains such that it could only have been there before the mountains themselves rose. The river's cut down through all of the geology, and in doing so, it's actually exposed 4 very nicely preserved coal seams, which makes it also easy to get at.
Easy to access, perhaps, but grueling work for the miners.
This particular layer of coal was actually very shallow, just 3.5 feet deep. And so the conditions for the miners were actually really dangerous. The miners were often just lying horizontally on the ground, just chipping away at the coal. And the deeper they got, the more danger there was, because the ceiling, essentially, was becoming more and more fragile. And if there was a collapse, they had no way of getting out.
It was a perilous business, but highly profitable. And although it's hard to imagine now, by the time of Nuttall's death in 1897, the town had developed into a vibrant and diverse community.
Nettleburg was the most productive mine in the gorge for a time, and as such, it attracted workers from all over the world. You had Italian Americans, Eastern Europeans, African Americans, all working in this area, and in many cases, buying land and building homes.
Their lives were about to change. A famous pioneer was set to arrive to put his own unique stamp on the town, bringing with him national attention. Set among the thick forests of the New River Gorge is an extraordinary tunnel of steel that appears to almost float up the mountain. Its creator was none other than the famous Henry Ford, who arrived here in 1920.
When Henry Ford bought up Nettleburg, the reaction, it was largely dismissive. In fact, one of the local journalists sarcastically wrote that he would have been better off using the old workings he had just acquired for storing auto parts as opposed to mining.
Some believed that the rich seams of coal were largely exhausted, but Ford thought otherwise. He was determined to get the coal from the seam hundreds of feet above the river corridor down to the railway below in a faster, more efficient way.
The coal was extremely friable or brittle, and so it had to be handled with care. So Henry Ford built this conveyor belt to transport it down to the river. And that conveyor belt was one of the longest in the world.
It became the beating heart of the town, as Park Ranger David Fwurst explains.
This is the most prominent feature in the town. It's the conveyor system, which is the heart of Nettleburg. And as you look up the hill here, you can see it runs 1,400 feet down from the mine portal, which is above, down to the tipple. And the way it operated was it carried the coal down a chute using what's called a rope and button system, which was a very advanced technology of that time.
This rope and button conveyor belt was part of a cutting-edge process. Loaded coal cars left the mine and entered the head house, where the coal was transferred to the conveyor. Then, the brittle was transported downhill slowly and gently to avoid any risk of damage. At the bottom was the tipple, where the coal was sorted and loaded into waiting rail cars. This efficient system enabled 125 tons of coal to be moved every single hour. So why did Henry Ford's high-tech venture come to an end?
At this time, Henry Ford's plant in Dearborn was turning out Model T cars at a terrific rate. It took a huge amount of energy to run what at the time was one of the largest mechanized production facilities ever built.
Ford wanted to control the supply of that energy, the fuel that would power his factories.
Henry Ford wanted to control every aspect of the car-making process, whether that was the rubber for tires, the steel for the bodywork, and even the coal for powering the factories.
The plan to control every stage of production was known as vertical integration. But Ford faced one crucial obstacle.
Bought the mine, but he couldn't afford to buy the railroad. And the railroad was what he needed to get the coal to his plant in Dearborn, Michigan. If he couldn't predict exactly when the deliveries were going to come, if he couldn't control the price, he realized that controlling the mine really didn't help him that much.
Once Ford realized he could neither control nor buy the railways, he swiftly abandoned Nettleburg, selling up in 1928.
The mine finally closed for good in 1958, and the last of the residents of Nettleburg moved away. They left their homes, and the forest and the vegetation began to creep back in and take over once again.
Today, the National Park Service is engaged in a constant battle with nature to prevent it from reclaiming Nettleburg's industrial heritage.
The New River Gorge has returned to being a near wilderness. Most of the visitors are people coming to enjoy wild nature, rock climbing and whitewater rafting, and the mines are silent.
Near the west coast of Portugal, high in the hills of Sintra, is a beguiling combination of structures set within a fantastical landscape.
The site's a little creepy. And the thing about it is that everything is hidden.
The gardens are large and lush, but when you start walking around them, things seem a little strange.
The entire place is like a labyrinth. You could go off this direction, you can go off that direction. There's too many options for you to logically sort of figure out.
At the center of it all is a building like nothing else.
It looks like some kind of mythological entry to the gates of hell or the center of the world.
And it just feels powerful, it feels purposeful, and you just want to descend. You want to find out what's down there.
But as you start that journey, it's absolutely not clear where it's going.
So there are still questions about this place. We don't have all the answers to the mysteries here.
Growing in the shadows of the enchanting mansion of Quinta da Regaleira, the gardens seem to live a life of their own in a world full of secrets and surprises.
When we walk in the garden, we are going to see lots of contrasts between darkness and light, the green of nature and the dark stone. It seems like a labyrinth, not only the exterior, but also the tunnel.
So where does this maze end? And for what purpose was the garden built? As local guide Mathilde Almesh knows, with this place, there's always more than meets the eye.
There's always something new to discover, a surprise in every corner. A cave or a tunnel or something dark that I didn't see before.
there's pathways that lead to nowhere. You turn the corner, there's a huge tower. The whole thing feels very surreal, as though it's a dream sequence from a movie.
The theatrical elements of the environment were quite deliberate. Everything here came straight from the imagination of the site's two creators, who both had something to prove.
It was built by a wealthy man called António Augusto Carvalho Monteiro. Carvalho Monteiro was the heir of a huge fortune.
Monteiro worked with an Italian architect and stage designer named Luigi Manini. Well, Manini must have felt like this was the ultimate. He had a client with unlimited amounts of money who wanted to build some of the craziest, most fanciful, most delightful stuff ever created.
The vision of these two men came to life with the completion of this curious masterpiece in 1910. The result was something entirely unique.
You see a promenade of statues of Greek and Roman gods. You see a chapel. You see a waterfall with stepping stones. Everywhere you turn, you see a different fantastical element borrowed from history with no real rhyme or reason for how it all hangs together.
Dramatic, baffling, and intriguing in equal measure, the route continues towards an unusual rock structure, which perhaps reveals the site's true purpose. It's known as the Initiation Well.
The well is almost like an optical illusion. It's like looking at a medieval tower in reverse. Instead of rising up into the sky, it's a staircase that spirals down into the earth.
This spiraling descent into darkness is all part of a captivating journey. But to where?
We are at the top of this structure and we need to go down the 9 levels. And the idea is for us to find the darkness down there. You don't really know what you are going to find down there. You don't know if you need to go up or if you have an exit. This is a test to make you feel the right way, to make you listen to your instincts, listen to yourself.
Part of the really interesting symbolism is the fact that there's 9 levels to the initiation well, the journey itself. And the number 9 is reminiscent of Dante's Inferno, of Dante's Hell. So it's almost a symbolic journey to hell and back.
The mixed symbols and references do little to explain any overall meaning. But there's one sign that might well unlock the mystery.
Okay, so we enter down the 9 circles into the darkness, and we find a clue here on the floor. At first, it seems an 8-pointed star, but it is a compass.
As you continue to look at the compass, another major shape jumps out at you. It's a large cross.
We believe it is a Knights Templar's cross, and this can be related to some initiation rites or the idea of initiation rituals.
The Knights Templar were a powerful religious order in the Middle Ages, known for their secret initiation ceremonies.
For 200 years, in the medieval period, the Knights Templar were the leading Catholic military and religious order. They were the spearhead of the Crusades. But ever since, people have wondered whether there was something unusual about them, whether there was something esoteric about them.
So, was this all connected to the rituals of the Templar Order? Or was it associated with another mysterious group?
It seems as if Monteiro and Manini, they wanted their visitors to rely on their senses. As you walk through the tunnel, you can't really see anything, so you have to use your hearing to direct you.
Initiation usually involves journey, And if you go back to some of the earliest initiatory cults, there were physical journeys through tunnels into different spaces with different experiences. And here, one gets a sense that a similar journey might be being laid out for the visitor.
Any visitor brave enough to venture toward the sound of the water is eventually rewarded by coming out in this lovely garden scene with its waterfall.
While a personal journey of self-discovery and enlightenment seems to have all been part of Montero's plan, if it was also meant for an initiation ceremony, then into which group isn't clear.
Everywhere you look, there's this wild mishmash of symbolism. You have pagan symbols, tarot, you have symbols that are associated with the Knights Templar, even Greek and Roman gods.
But finally, as the journey through the garden draws to a close, the overall answers seem to be becoming a little clearer.
So you find yourself at the end in this chapel, this apparent house of God, and you think, all right, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to finish my journey. It's all about God.
This is no ordinary chapel. It's full of symbols that can have different meanings.
One of the symbols you notice right away is the all-seeing eye. Now, of course, that's a Masonic symbol that says the eye of God is always watching.
But like most things in this intriguing place, everything is open to interpretation.
The ropes around it, a reference to the Freemasonry, or a reference to the Portuguese discoveries in the 16th century, representing the vessels.
So, while the Freemasons are known for their bizarre initiation ceremonies and their use of the rope or tow line symbol, perhaps the more obvious use for ropes could be a better clue to what Montero really intended.
It may, of course, have nothing to do with initiation at all. At the time it was built, Portugal was going through many changes. Those could have been felt as very unstable times by someone like the builder of this place, and he may well have been trying to hark back to a time when things felt a little more certain, when Portugal was a stronger, more international country. This may simply be a reaffirmation of the solidity of the Portugal he remembered, rather than anything remotely arcane.
Following the assassination of the Portuguese king in 1908, the old order began to crumble. For the aging, wealthy monarchist Montero, perhaps this place was his own elaborate but private tribute to a lost world.
He tried to represent here his ideals, his beliefs. That is why when we walk around the garden and when we visit the chapel and the palace, it's like to take a glimpse into Carvalho Montero's mind.
Following Montero's death in 1920, the house and gardens were sold, and the initiation well was forgotten about for the next 75 years.
This appears to be an initiation center, but guess what? We might be wrong. Montero, he never wrote it down. But what we do know, its real purpose, he's taken it to the grave.
Along the rugged coastline of Cornwall in southwest England are a number of extraordinary sights.
It's an abandoned, isolated, but quite beautiful scene of these derelict buildings on top of these high, craggy cliffs with the vast crashing waves down below.
From beneath the lush green hills above, man-made structures emerge from the craggy rock face.
It's all a bit dramatic. You've got these big structures precariously balanced on this cliff top. You've got the waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashing beneath, and it's just like at any time these structures could fall into the sea.
It's a startling and quite dramatic juxtaposition between this rolling, gentle, calming, poledark countryside just inland, and then this rough, violent industrial scene.
A mixture of towers and strange ruins litter the hilltops.
The buildings themselves look so precarious on the edge of the cliffs. I mean, you really wonder, why would you need them to be there? They're not lighthouses. So were they getting something for the sea? What was the reason for them being so close at the water's edge?
These structures look defiantly over the Atlantic Ocean. But the peace and tranquility today is in stark contrast to what went on here centuries ago. This was once at the center of Cornwall's rich mining heritage.
Working in these mines would have just been an assault on the senses. It's a cacophony of noises.
This would have been Victorian industry at its most intense. The noise of the stamps crushing the tin ore, of the vast chains hauling the carts. This was an extraordinary industrial hive of activity.
The remnants of powerful machinery inside crumbling stone towers are reminders of a mighty industrial past. This is Batalak and Levant, two neighboring mines on Cornwall's wild tin coast, the site of tin and copper mining since Roman times. However, these are no ordinary mines.
What I love about these structures is they give a glorious window into an incredible feat of Victorian engineering.
But why were they built on the cliff precipice? And what catastrophes brought them crashing down to earth? By the mid-1700s, these two mines had established themselves firmly on the tin and copper mining map. But they weren't just typical mine shafts, as Charlotte Tomlinson of the National Trust explains.
This shaft is where the skips came up, so it's about 2,000 feet down, and then it does go out under the sea by about 1 kilometre as well.
What's incredible about these mines is they weren't mining land, they were mining under the sea, and half a mile out of sea.
These are submarine mines that follow seams of precious minerals out under the seabed.
So the way these mines worked was you would start by digging vertically, and you'd dig down in a mine shaft, and then you'd start digging horizontally, and you'd just keep on digging. But obviously, these places were full of water, and that's where the beam engine came in, because it would pump the water out so you could access the rock face.
Beam engines were designed and developed in the early 1700s, specifically to remove floodwater from Cornwall's deep water mines. A form of steam engine, an overhead beam pivoted up and down, applying force from a vertical position. The driving motion of the piston powered a water pump, using a combination of steam and atmospheric pressure. The miners were then able to continue their very dangerous work.
And so you could imagine, particularly in the early days, they're just using, sheer brute force to break the rocks open with pickaxes and a bit later with dynamite. Going deep down, but then going out with sea above you, that's a really dangerous and precarious thing to do.
Dangerous for the miners then, but the high market value of tin ensured healthy profits for the mine owners.
The value of tin at the time meant that more risks were being taken. People would go to further and further lengths to be able to extract that metal.
And that meant pushing further and further out to sea.
Now remember, this is back in the 18th century. We don't have the mechanical air drills. We don't have the tunneling machines. These are people working by hand with chisel, hammers, and gunpowder.
For the miners, every day meant descending into the depths and saying their prayers.
This was very dangerous work. And long before health and safety, the human casualty toll was high, not only from the natural dangers, falling rocks, injuries, disasters, accidents, but also the long-term effects of working in such toxic environments.
It was dark and dirty and hot, and the effects on their health of working underground were bad, and they had very short lifespans. They didn't really live past 30 quite often. That was the usual life expectancy of a miner.
In the early 1800s, a pumping engine was set up at the base of the cliffs. Those in the mines worked feverishly to produce tin, copper, and arsenic. They included hundreds of women and children. Batalak alone dumped a staggering 1.5 million tons of waste into the sea, dyeing it a distinctive red color. As the Industrial Revolution soared ahead in the mid-19th century, new technology was introduced to increase production even further. In 1865, Batalak became the focus of national attention.
At Batalak, they installed a new winding engine, and it was so cutting edge and so innovative that the Prince of Wales and his wife, the future King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra, came to visit, and they went down the shaft in the winding engine. This became such a topic of note and such a tourist attraction that the mine was even able to charge visitors a guinea to come in and look around.
This new technology vastly increased the efficiency and speed at which men could be moved in and out of the mine shafts. But dark days lay ahead. In the late 19th century, falling tin and copper prices hit the region hard. Most of the mines closed, including Batalak, which fell silent in 1895. Then, in 1919, disaster struck Levant, when the engine that powered men up and down the main shaft gave way.
A link between the rod and the engine snapped, sending 31 men plummeting to their deaths at the bottom of the shaft. And that led to the eventual decline of the mine, from which it never recovered.
In 1930, Levant was finally abandoned. Today, Batalak is a World Heritage Site. And while the age of tin is over, the beam engine at Levant has been lovingly restored, and tourists can now see this mighty machine in action once again.
I think Levant as a site is unique because it's got the working beam engine, and in its original place, essentially it could be doing the job that it was doing, 178 years ago, and they can see that working and in action.
Now they lie abandoned, but once they were at the cutting edge of engineering. There are echoes of history in these decaying structures. They remind us of terror and war, but also of great innovation and human endeavor.